Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate you holding this hearing. Look forward to hearing from our witnesses. The biggest economic challenge we face right now continues to be President Biden's inflation crisis. The cost of housing, the cost of gasoline, groceries, cars, basic necessities of life have skyrocketed. Rather than addressing the problem and proposing solutions, the Biden administration's answer is, don't worry, just keep printing more money and hope that inflation will just magically disappear. Mr. Chairman, these huge price spikes are not going to magically disappear, especially when liberals and socialists continue their reckless tax and spend policies. The American people know that the massive increase in government spending we've seen in these last few months is responsible for the rising cost of prices that we pay for everyday household items. This, by the way, is a tax on hardworking families. And what is President Biden's answer? He's pushing for an additional $4 trillion in new taxes and spending, exactly the opposite of what America needs right now. What America needs at this critical moment is to stay on the path toward fully reopening. We cannot slide backwards. Schools must reopen for in-person learning. The cost our children have already paid is too high. Businesses need to continue bringing back employees, and the federal government needs to stop paying people more to stay home than to go back to work. The federal government needs to stop undermining the relationship between landlord and tenant and let that market function properly. What has allowed us to get back to some normalcy has not been government spending. It certainly has not been government-imposed lockdowns. That's the opposite of normalcy. What has gotten us back on the path to opening is getting control of this invisible enemy. And America did that by creating, producing, and distributing safe and effective vaccines. As every member of this subcommittee knows, I, as ranking member, as well as many of us here, have been advocating for and encouraging vaccines for over a year. And we've also highlighted the success of Operation Warp Speed at bringing multiple vaccines to families in record time. In fact, I called out those who talked down the vaccine during last year when you saw a number of people from President Biden and now Vice President Harris on down who were actually promoting vaccine hesitancy. They ought to come back out and admit they shouldn't have done it, admit that they were wrong in promoting that. In fact, when President Biden took office and created a goal of 100 million shots in a day, which, by the way, we were already on track to administer the day he took office, many of us said that the president should be more ambitious. He should increase the goal to 200 million shots a day. Ultimately, President Biden embraced that goal. Mr. Chairman, you and I worked together on the vaccine hesitancy hearing. We jointly invited witnesses. Our views have been clear and consistent. If you want to get vaccinated, it is safe, effective, free, and available. But I've also been clear. If the goal is to get more people vaccinated, shaming people and mandating those vaccinations won't work. Censoring the truth won't work either. It only breeds more distrust. Let's all work together to get the facts out to people, particularly populations that continue to display hesitancy. Let's present the evidence, but also reassure individuals that the decision is theirs. If someone has a concern or a question, now is the time to have that conversation with their doctor. I believe that strategy will ultimately maximize the number of Americans who choose to take the vaccine, because after all, this is a medical decision, not a political decision. According to the Mayo Clinic, 87% of Americans over the age of 75 have already received at least one dose of vaccine. More than 90% of individuals aged 65 to 74 have received at least one dose. Since vaccinations began, emergency room visits related to the virus have declined 77% among older adults. And of course, as we remember, at the outbreak of the pandemic, that was the population that was experienced the largest percentage of deaths. Just seniors in nursing homes alone were at one point responsible for over 40% of deaths when they represented less than 1% of the population. While we're seeing some breakthrough infections, that is, infections that occurred after vaccination, those illnesses tended to be milder than infections among unvaccinated people. We know no vaccine is 100% effective, but a very small percentage of vaccinated individuals we know will get sick. We've seen the anecdotal evidence, but that is not evidence that the vaccine does not work. The Delta variant is spreading at an alarming rate. I'm especially now concerned about the new Lambda variant that we're seeing coming from South and Central America. The Biden administration must address their self-created border crisis. Dr. Fauci actually told this subcommittee that the Biden administration was violating their own CDC guidance at the border by failing to test for COVID and for allowing too many people to be crammed into cages, many with COVID, at detention facilities on the border, only to then be shipped around the country and increase the spread of the virus. Many of us talked about this that have gone down and seen the crisis at the border. Border Patrol agents will tell you that many coming across, number one, are not being tested for COVID, but ultimately, as they go into these detention facilities packed together, some have COVID and then they spread it to everybody else. If an American citizen today went to Mexico for summer vacation, they're not allowed to get on an airplane and fly back into America without first having a negative COVID test. Yet someone can have COVID, be positive, come across our border illegally, and be welcomed into the country, and then given a ticket to get on a plane or a bus and sent throughout America, which, by the way, the Biden administration won't even tell us where they're going. So communities can't even prepare for this outbreak. We're running out of time to stop the Lambda variant. In fact, the dangerous Lambda variant is spreading widely in countries like Peru. And now with President Biden's open border crisis, we're seeing many illegals starting to spread COVID's dangerous Lambda variant into America. We just saw a few more cases pop up in Texas, right along the border, where people are showing up with the Lambda variant. As we worry about the Delta variant, which is dangerous, we should also be worried about this new Lambda variant that is coming in. And again, as Dr. Fauci testified in the past, that when President Trump said we're going to stop flights from coming in from China at the beginning of this virus, it saved American lives. Dr. Fauci also said President Trump's decision to stop flights from Europe as Europe was getting an outbreak, that saved American lives too. I would call on President Biden to look at the numbers of the Lambda variant that's coming in from South America, and he should get control of the southern border to stop the spread of the Lambda variant into America. We should not be backsliding on reopening. We should not be flooding the economy with trillions more in government spending. We should be scaling back the emergency federal programs. The eviction moratorium, I do realize that that's the subject of today's hearing. This eviction moratorium is an actual good example. On September 1st of 2020, the CDC took the unprecedented step of issuing a temporary national moratorium of evictions for non-payment of rent under the guise of limiting the spread of COVID-19 and protecting low-income families who were struggling. But of course, in the December omnibus, Congress appropriated $25 billion for emergency rental assistance to eliminate that debt. Congress also added an additional $21 billion in a second emergency rental program via the American Rescue Plan, for a total of $46 billion in emergency rental assistance funds to be distributed by the Biden administration. Yet, as of the end of June, the Biden administration's pathetically distributed less than 10% of this money to renters who are in need of assistance. The Biden administration has mismanaged this program, and unfortunately, our request to bring in Secretary Yellen today was denied. Glad to hear she'll finally be coming weeks later, but we need those answers today about why that program is being so mismanaged. The impact of the eviction moratorium has been most heavily felt by mom-and-pop landlords who depend on rental income for their livelihood. The extension of the eviction moratorium, at the same time, by the way, the government's paying people more money not to work than to work, has forced many mom-and-pop renters to sell their rental property or to actually have to move in to their own rental property as they're selling other properties just to pay their bills. The moratorium is an example of why we need to stay focused on reopening America. Setting aside for a moment that a series of federal judges have found this moratorium to be unconstitutional, The fact is, the administration's response to renters in need has not worked and has hurt as many people as it's helped. The federal government has failed miserably at managing the landlord-tenant relationship. Let's focus on getting the facts out to people. It's safe to reopen. We have done very well with vaccinating vulnerable populations. COVID deaths have decreased dramatically, but with these new variants, now is a good time for all those who have been hesitant to take a renewed look at getting vaccinated. With that, Mr. Chairman.